When you think about jazz chord exercises, then it's probably about learning new chords, but it's actually more important that you have exercises that help you take the chords that you already know and then get those to sound great. And that is what these 3 exercises will help you do. The first one is also by far the most fun way to practice chords, and the other 2 will help you remember chords and add some better rhythms to your comping. If you're nerdy enough with jazz chords like I am, then maybe you can enjoy just listening to all these beautiful chord voicings, but of course there's more to it than just the notes, even if they do sound beautiful. The last few weeks I sort of rediscovered this exercise. As you may know, I was in Taiwan to play at the Taichung Jazz Festival with Nick Javier, and I had an amazing time there, but since it's quite far away, then I had to deal with some jet lag when I got back, which had me waking up at 3 in the morning. Now while I was readjusting, I realized that I actually really like getting up before everybody else and then spend some time practicing and getting started with the day before getting the kids ready for school. Now, one of the exercises I started to do in my routine was to take a song and then practice comping it with the metronome on 2 and 4. There are many reasons to practice like this. It's fun to play and you give yourself a chance to be creative with the chords and the harmony of the song. If you've never done this exercise, I'll give you a guide on how to get started in a bit. The exercise helps you work on timing, rhythm, but also how all the chords should sound when they're in a piece of music. And it's a great way to start getting new chords or concepts into your playing. And of course, if you want to be good at comping, then you should be practicing comping. Nobody ever spent all their time doing push-ups and then magically expect to win tennis tournaments. And if they try, they'll probably get frustrated.
There goes another racket.
So while practicing chord inversions and diatonic chords is useful, then that should not be the only thing that you're doing if you want to be better at comping. And when you practice like this, you have a place to experiment and explore, because it doesn't matter if you screw up something, you're not gonna get fired. If you've never practiced like this, then here are a few steps to get you started and also a few simple tricks that immediately will level up how you sound. Start with a song or chord progression that you know really well. For example, a 12-bar blues like this one in C. To begin with, just play the song, so turn on your metronome and just lay down the basic chords. Don't use complicated rhythms or voicings. Maybe just get the groove across with a simple Charleston rhythm or something like that. And as you can tell, I'm mostly just using shell voicings here, just because I want to keep it simple but also clear. There are a few easy ways to get this to move a bit more and sound more interesting, and one of the best ones is to use some chromatic passing chords, but then doing that in the easy way, so not thinking in complicated theory and substitutions, but just really just move the chord a fret up or down and then use that as an approach. But you can also use passing chords like this as a way to get to the next chord, and that's a great way to drive the music forward, and it sounds amazing on a blues. Check this out. From here you can start to expand and see if you get new ideas for rhythms or melodies, and if it doesn't work, then you can just try again in the next chorus without the soloist wanting to kill you. Once you start putting the chords to use on songs, then you might find that this next practical approach to thinking about chords is very useful and probably better than what you're doing now. It's very likely that you're not thinking about your chord voicings in a way that actually makes it easy for you to use them. And I think I'm kind of guilty as well when it comes to this in terms of the videos that I make, because the way that we teach chords and think about chords are in these separate categories like shell voicings, drop 2, upper structure triads, and stuff like that. And this means that you end up practicing diatonic chords or inversions, only using one type of chord voicing. But that doesn't really fit with what you do when you play music. So you want to start changing that. The important thing to remember is that when you're comping, then you don't have to think about a C7 voicing as E half diminished drop 2 inversion with the flat 5 as the lowest note and an 11th instead of the 3rd. Because that's much, much too complicated, and nobody does that.
No.
This exercise is probably more a question of exploring and then using what you discover, but it is a really great way to connect chords across types and in that way level up your comping. Try this out. Most of us navigate the neck by thinking of the root of the chord and then finding that on the two lowest strings, so E and A. So if you're looking for a C7, then you have a shell voicing here in the 3rd fret and one here in the 8th fret. Let's connect this one to some other chords that you probably already know. Notice how adding the G on the B string makes it a drop 3 voicing. And of course you also have the C713 version here. And these all work together. You can even add one more string and then you're playing a drop 2 voicing with a bass note. And of course there's a variation of this as well. And remember that you're just thinking about these as variations of this basic C7 shell voicing. And it's very practical to sometimes just leave out the root. So then you have first this 2-note shell. Now if we start adding notes like we did before, then of course first you just get some triad voicings, and then that becomes drop 2 voicings as well. So when you think of C7, then you should see all these options and not just be stuck with a single grip. And you can of course also mix the rootless and the complete chords. In fact, that's a very practical way to work with chords for comping in a duo or for chord melody. First, just state the basic shell voicing or an easy variation of this, and then be more free to add some other stuff with rootless voicings. Playing more interesting rhythms in your comping is also not necessarily about learning a lot of short rhythms. In fact, zooming out and focusing on a few rhythms in a piece of music is probably the easiest way to improve on it. If you compare your comping to a sentence where the rhythms of each bar would be the words, then I think you'll agree that what you say in a sentence is much more important than what words you use, especially if some words turn what you're trying to say into nonsense. So even if loquacious sounds amazing, probably not the description of your solo that you dream of. Working on this is a lot easier than you might think, and the trick that you want to use is chord response and thinking in phrases that are several bars long. So let's say that you take a rhythm that you know really well and you can already play. Now you repeat that, and then at the end of a section, so at the end of a 4-bar or 8-bar section, then you come up with a different rhythm as a sort of conclusion to that section. On a blues, that might sound like this. And don't worry about playing the same thing several times, because when you do that with a comping rhythm, it's actually called a riff, and you're giving the soloist something predictable to play against, and you're also giving the rest of the band something that's easy to interact with. But you can also practice doing this on a song and then come up with different conclusions. Like this, you're using the rhythms that you already know to come up with more rhythms, and you get a much more natural flow because you're working on connecting the different things and thinking in chord response. And this actually works just as well if you even do more chord response like every other bar. You might not be able to hear it, but I have actually practiced really a lot of guitar, and I found this to be pretty much always the case. If you're trying to learn things in the context where you want to use them, then it's both easier and you learn it a lot faster, because you can throw away a lot of the useless theoretical rhythms or arpeggio inversions or whatever is wasting your time. One guitarist who really understood how important it is to make things simple was Joe Pass, and while his playing was sometimes amazingly complex, then his approach to jazz chords was all about simplicity. And that is really the way you want to do this. You can check that out in this video, where it's about both the chords and the progressions being made easier to handle. And he definitely has a point.